Hey everyone, and welcome back to this Ethical Point Explainer. I'm your host, and as always, your perpetual student of public policy. Joining me today is our resident mentor and governance expert. We are unpacking a really fascinating, honestly kind of wild contradiction right at the very heart of India's economic rise.
Hey there, it's absolutely great to be here. And you hit the nail on the head. It really is a massive contradiction. Think about it. We're looking at a nation projected by the IMF to be the world's fourth largest economy. But at the same time, we're struggling with this stark reality. We have these heavily funded sectors where the money simply isn't translating into real-world infrastructure or human capital.
Exactly. I mean, it's the ultimate friction point between macroeconomic growth and grassroots reality. So today we're going to break down exactly why allocated funds remain either underutilized or misutilized, and much more importantly, how we actually fix it. So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with 1, the GDP governance paradox, then 2, frameworks for fiscal efficiency, 3, decentralized oversight and ethics, 4, pathway to top 3, and finally, 5, UPSC mains exam strategy. Love it. From diagnosis straight to exam-ready solutions. Let's just dive right in.
All right, Section 1, the GDP governance paradox.
Setting the context here is absolutely crucial because, well, as an aspiring civil servant, you can't solve a problem if you don't really understand the environment it exists in, right? Which brings us perfectly to this exact UPSC 2025 General Studies Paper 4 question. It reads, India is an emerging economic power, fourth largest by IMF. However, it has been observed that in some sectors, allocated funds remain either underutilized or misutilized. What specific measures would you recommend for ensuring accountability in this regard to stop leakages and gaining the status of third largest economy of the world in near future? What's really interesting here is the framing. It explicitly highlights that intense friction between massive economic allocations and actual grassroots impact. It's basically challenging you to step up and think like a top-level economic policy advisor. And this core paradox is perfectly illustrated when we look at the two sides of the coin. On one side, we have GDP expansion, just the sheer raw size of the economy hitting that fourth largest spot. But right next to it, lagging human capital and infrastructure.
Right. So just having a huge GDP expansion doesn't automatically magically equal good schools, hospitals, or paved roads. It's like having a massive water tank, but all the pipes are blocked or leaking.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. The crucial takeaway is that allocating more funds literally doesn't matter if we don't fundamentally fix the public financial management cycle. Underutilization delays outcomes, meaning the money just sits there gathering dust. And misutilization, that actively erodes public trust and wastes incredibly scarce resources. We really need a radical overhaul of how public wealth is managed, from the very initial planning stages all the way to the final audit.
Okay, moving on to Section 2, frameworks for fiscal efficiency.
So if I'm an aspiring civil servant sitting in that high-pressure exam hall, how do I actually propose concrete, systemic solutions to this structural issue? We need specific tools here.
Absolutely. We have to move way beyond vague, generic ideas like we need to stop corruption and talk about real institutional frameworks. And the first major tool to pull out is OMF, or the Output Outcome Monitoring Framework. To give you a quick layman's definition, this is fundamentally about shifting from an outlay budget to an outcome budget.
Okay, so instead of a department just saying, hey, we spent all the money you gave us, they actually have to prove what they achieved with it.
Exactly. It means every single rupee spent is hard linked to specific measurable deliverables and timelines. It's accountability by design. We're judging success by the actual results on the ground, not just by the act of writing the checks.
Let's look at how this plays out practically. Under the old system of outlay budgeting, the focus is just expenditure. For example, the Education Ministry might proudly say, well, we spent X amount of crores on building schools this year.
Right. But under outcome budgeting, that's just not enough anymore. The goal completely shifts to a measurable deliverable. So the real question becomes, did we achieve a 10 to 15% rise in rural literacy? These estimates must be realistic, and future funding allocations should actually be tied to whether a department hit those exact performance metrics the previous year.
Okay, so that totally solves the planning side of things, but what about the actual transit of funds? A ton of leakages happen when money is moving from the center to the states and then trickling down to local bodies. I see PFMS mentioned a lot. Can we get a clear layman's definition of what that is before we apply it?
For sure.
The Public Financial Management System, or PFMS, is basically a centralized digital platform. Think of it as providing an end-to-end digital trail for all public funds. It ensures massive transparency because it tracks every single transaction, making sure money only moves forward when the previous step is completely verified.
And the real beauty of PFMS is that it enables what we call just-in-time funding.
Just in time? Sort of like modern manufacturing supply chains?
Precisely. You only release the next installment of funds when the previous one has been fully utilized and, crucially, digitally verified. This stops billions in funds from just sitting idle in state bank accounts, which immediately cures that underutilization problem. It also completely prevents the infamous March rush.
Ah, the March rush. That frantic, panic spending at the very end of the financial year, just so departments don't lose their unspent budgets, which is, of course, exactly where a lot of the misutilization and careless spending happens.
Now, looking at this number, 4.31 lakh crore rupees. That is an absolutely staggering amount of money.
It is. And the crazy thing is, this isn't some theoretical projection. That 4.31 lakh crore represents the actual cumulative savings and benefits achieved by the center simply by using PFMS for direct benefit transfers, or DBT. By ensuring a direct digital pipeline straight to the beneficiary, we cut out the middlemen, eliminated the duplicate accounts, and practically plugged the leakages overnight. That is the incredible power of tech-enabled governance.
And we definitely don't stop at just PFMS. To ensure clean, competitive procurement and to automatically catch abnormal spending, we can deploy an entire suite of digital governance tools. For instance, we can use artificial intelligence to flag high-risk transactions for targeted inspections. We can use blockchain for tamper-proof contracts.
Geotagging is a great one too, right? Like actually requiring a photo with GPS coordinates of the newly built village road before you release the final payment. No way around that.
Exactly. And combining all this with the universal e-procurement, or the GEM portal, ensures standard bidding and vendor ratings. It drastically reduces any chance of collusion and fraud behind closed doors. So what about outdated welfare schemes? Sometimes it feels like money is wasted just because we keep funding things purely out of habit.
Yeah, that's what we call budgetary inertia. And the ultimate administrative scrubbers for that are zero-based budgeting, or ZBB, and sunset clauses. A sunset clause basically means that a welfare scheme, what we might jokingly call a zombie scheme, will automatically expire every 3 to 5 years.
Ah, I see. Unless the department can explicitly re-justify its existence and actually prove its outcomes to get renewed funding, that forces constant evaluation instead of just blindly renewing budgets. Which brings us nicely to Section 3, Decentralized Oversight and Ethics. Now, tracking the money digitally is one thing, but governance is fundamentally a human endeavor. We have a moral duty to ensure transparent governments through probity. And remember for your exam, probity is the absolute adherence to the highest principles and ideals in public service. This is exactly where social audits come in. A layman's definition of a social audit is simply this: the best auditors out there are the citizens directly impacted by the policies. So it's legally mandating that the beneficiaries themselves verify the work on the ground. Yes, exactly. Imagine a citizen dashboard where locals can pull out their phones and see exactly how much was allocated versus how much was supposedly spent on their specific neighborhood projects, like a village pond or a rural health clinic. If the dashboard says $1 million rupees was spent on a clinic, and the villagers look up and see an empty field, well, that discrepancy is immediately identified by the very people it affects. But to make social audits actually work, local bodies need real, tangible power. This relies on the 4F framework for decentralization. That's funds, functions, functionaries, and framework. You have to actually give local governments the money, the specific responsibilities, the personnel to do the job, and a legal framework to execute it.
Right, but as you mentioned earlier, it's trust but verify. This decentralization requires extremely clear key performance indicators, or KPIs, and mandatory quarterly utilization certificates, just to ensure the 4Fs aren't accidentally creating localized corruption instead.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the very apex of the whole system: ethical leadership. Accountability must rigorously flow top-down.
This directly addresses that crisis of conscience so many civil servants end up facing in the field.
It really does. Leaders must deeply internalize the code of ethics. They need to proactively disclose their assets and any conflicts of interest. And vitally, there must be robust whistleblower protection, safe, anonymous channels to report misuse without fear. Without this top-level ethical culture and concurrent performance audits by the CAG during the execution phase, leakages will always find a way.
Moving right along to Section 4, Pathway to Top 3. We noted earlier that India briefly slipped to 6th in some IMF assessments, largely due to currency fluctuations. So how do these specific reforms actually guarantee a push to the top 3? Well, because becoming a top 3 economy isn't just about spending more money, it's about the sheer quality of that spending. Let's break down the 4 outcomes of fiscal efficiency.
First, higher capital efficiency, meaning we get way more physical infrastructure and human capital out of every single rupee we spend. Second, faster project completion. This drastically reduces cost overruns and naturally crowds in private investment, simply because investors see things actually getting built on time. Makes total sense. Third is the trust dividend. Good governance obviously improves investor confidence and boosts tax compliance. And finally, inclusive outcomes. Plugging those leakages ensures the money actually reaches the bottom of the pyramid, which boosts basic consumption and productivity across the board.
And finally, Section 5, UPSC Mains Exam Strategy. All right, structure is literally everything in the mains exam. You want the examiner to see immediately that you understand both the macroeconomics and the microethics of the issue. So here is a rapid-fire, highly structured roadmap for organizing a solid 10-marker answer. For your intro, clearly state the paradox. Highlight that gap between GDP potential and actual grassroots outcomes due to underutilization. In body paragraph 1, bring in the tech, talk about shifting to oomph and using real-time digital tracking like PFMS and AI for just-in-time funding. Body paragraph 2, hit administrative efficiency. Mention zero-based budgeting and sunset clauses to kill off those zombie schemes. Body paragraph 3, address the ethics paper requirement directly. Discuss grassroots social audits, citizen dashboards, and empowering the CAG for concurrent audits. And for the conclusion, connect the quality of governance directly back to achieving that top 3 economy status.
And speaking of the conclusion, consider this guiding principle. Being in the top 3 economies is as much about governance quality as about the quantum of spending.
I love that. That is the perfect, high-scoring conclusion for a mains essay or a case study. It perfectly summarizes the entire philosophy that it's not just how much wealth a nation has, but how ethically and efficiently it deploys it.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer and our trend extrapolator. This is where we look ahead at where future UPSC questions might come from. I want to leave you with this really provocative question to debate. What is the primary hurdle in India's development right now? Is it a lack of technology to track the funds, or is it fundamentally a lack of political and administrative will to actually enforce the rules? Now, that is a brilliant question to ponder for your upcoming ethics case studies. Thank you so much for joining us on this Ethical Pointer Explainer. Keep studying, keep questioning, and we will see you in the next session.